Okay, so next, that hair's not as shiny as it could be, but you get the idea. You can just add more and more, do more and more, depending on how shiny you want it. I'm going to go back to skin, though, and add more skin. So the thing is, here I've got this layer, and I'm probably going to change the hue of it later, but you need more than one shadow layer, because one of them gets to be really, really saturated and intense, and the other one is really not saturated. And it's the actual shadowy shadow that looks like shadow. In other words, it looks gray. It's the actual shadow that follows the shape of things. This is too gray. I'm going to fix it later. That's what I say to everything. I'm going to fix it later. Hey, don't mind this. I'm going to fix it later. Also, I'm just going to paint this and fix it later. Don't mind my bad habit. I'll fix it later. It's okay to fix it later, though. Really. Okay, so you take your most shadowy shadows, which is going to be under the nose, any direct shadows cast by hair, the areas around the eyes that are really, really like indented, but not everywhere, because then he'll look like he has a black eye, so be careful. But like between the eye and the eyebrow, there's usually a spot. Underneath the nose, there's always a spot. The underside of the nose, right? The underside of the lip, you'll notice there's a spot, and actually sometimes the top of the lip. It really depends on how much lip you want your character to have. With men, you usually don't want very much. But yeah. Now this one stays fairly hard, but you can still soften it a little. Depending on, if you soften it too much, it'll just look like mush, so be careful. I'm just going to edit some colors and stuff, because I can. Right now I'm making this more saturated and stuff. Then I'm going to change this one. Make it a little bit more purpley. Because, here's another trick. Your character will fit into their background better if you incorporate colors from your background into him. So for example, when I'm shading his skin, I'm adding I'm tinting the shadow purple because this background is purple. If this background was green, I would be shading him with a tint of green. And I know that that sounds insane, but it really does work. It really, really does. You just kind of have to trust that it does. I'm not talking about like super, super saturated purple. I'm just saying a tiny hint of purple in the color that you choose will go a really long way in making him look like he fits in his background, in my experience. So I'm going to do some more, but then in really, really low opacity. Just because. And this really depends on your character's shape of the face. I tend to do round faces, so you can alter as needed. I'm sorry. This is just a demo of how I do things. Anyway. Okay. So now, I'm just going to toss some things down on the clothing because this isn't really about the clothing. So I'm just going to pretend like there are some folds and pretend like I know how to do folds. I don't know how to do folds. I'm just going to pretend like I do. Haha, not with that color. Here's some kind of folds that kind of suck. I'm sorry. I'm just following the same principles where things are slightly warmer and lighter and other things are slightly colder and darker. And folds are kind of special because they should probably stay a little bit hard instead of like blurring like I did on the face. You should probably not blur everything. She says as she picks up the blur tool. No, eraser is better for this. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just going to add an eye. So first, you want to do the whites of your eyes. Here's the trick about the whites of your eyes. They are not actually white. They're not. They're slightly off-white, kind of more like skin color-ish. Almost white, but not really white. Also, they have shadow. They are 3D like everything else. So it's really important that instead of just shading the eyes, you shade the whites of the eyes too. There's a little bit under the eyelashes, even for guys. It's kind of a round shape. So there's a little bit shadow under. That's too much, but you know. And then there's kind of a highlight in the middle. I will show you. Kind of like around here. I usually add just a little bit of highlight. It's not white. I never use 100% white or 100% black. Sometimes when I do hue and saturation, it turns something into 100% white or 100% black. But I don't like to paint with it because I think it really cheapens the overall effect. Like sometimes when people shade with only black, it kind of suddenly makes it look flat. So I try to avoid it if possible. You can usually get a better effect if you go for just slightly off white in the color, in the general color of that general area. You just kind of go slightly off white. It helps, I think. So, his eyes are blue, but be careful that it's not like blue. I mean, it's not like this. This is not what you want. Not what you want. You want less saturation, especially on your base layer. So less saturation. That already looks really saturated. I might have to desaturate that. Yeah, there we go. This is more the color that I wanted. Okay, so that's the base. I never do eyes the same way twice, like everything else. But you add a pupil, kind of like this. The pupil is actually smaller than you think it is. Because in anime, they always shade the top of the eye, and then they do the pupil from that. The pupil is actually a circle, and it's actually not very big. So, oops. So, there we go. So now you can draw the part that's across. Kind of like this. See how you like it. Just kind of draw it however you like it. And stuff. Go on like that. Yeah. Okay. So here you go. And then you do another layer. If you're doing layers. If you're not, that's fine. And you can add some highlights. Highlights are a little bit more saturated, but they don't actually have to be very saturated to get a really saturated blue looking color. If you do too much saturation, it's gonna look cheaper. So be careful. This isn't actually all that saturated, but it still looks blue. I usually go for one more layer, a little bit more saturated, and warmer, as always, for highlights. And I do a little bit more, if I'm going for anime style. Yeah, it really, really is. And then, add a highlight. Notice I'm not telling you how to do your layers because everyone does layers differently. But add a highlight, or more than one. That looks really, really, really bright. Highlights aren't always white. In fact, make sure you use your rule of not 100% white, because it'll look better. Especially if you're going for the semi-realism that you said earlier. It'll look better if you don't do 100% white. Just trust me. There. And you've got an eye. Now, let me say what I'm saying over there out loud. I would call this done right about now. I like my pictures contrasty. You can add more color I don't like doing that. You can add less color. I don't really like doing that either. Yeah. That skin doesn't look very contrasty, but, you know, it works. So, here's this picture all zoomed in. It's actually really low resolution, I'm sorry. But there it is. There you have it. Yeah. That's the quick version of how I do things. Thanks for watching, and this is only my style. It's not correct. It's not better than anyone else's. It's just mine. It's not worse than anyone else's either.